2015, we had a conference, and Dr. Fuhrman spoke. He gave 2 lectures. One of them has 175,000 views on YouTube. One has 200,000. Brenda Davis gave a lecture that has 75,000 views. Brian and Anna Marie have given many lectures that have tens of thousands of views each. A lot of people have seen this stuff. And I've showed these to a lot of people. And I say, you know, what do you think? And very often they go, that was fantastic. That was amazing information. And I say, okay, great. So are you going to change anything? And they say, well, I spoke to my nutritionist or my dietitian or my doctor, and they said something else. And I said, so what are you going to do? They said, well, I'm going to listen to my nutritionist or dietitian. So I'm wondering, you know, should people listen to their, okay, so when someone says I spoke to a nutritionist or I spoke to a dietitian or I spoke to a doctor about diet, should they assume that person is qualified, trained? I mean, how should they interpret the word dietitian and nutritionist? It has a lot of weight. People respect it. What should they make of it? Because it seems like most nutritionists and dietitians, I don't know if most, but many, are not recommending what you're saying. They're saying that fish and chicken is fine.
So just so everybody is clear and understands, a dietitian has to do an undergraduate degree program that is at least in Canada, I think it's the same in the States, 4 years, plus an internship or a master's. And as of next year, I believe it will be a master's. And so it's for at least 5 to 6 years of post-secondary education. So there and training in assessing scientific studies and so forth. However, there still is a fairly big influence of industry on the profession. And I can remember when I was in university, and this is, 35 or so years ago, we were actually courted by the dairy and meat industries. They gave us free educational materials to use in our practices, free little courses after hours at school. They provided us with all sorts of beautiful things. They still fund a lot of our annual meetings and our nutrition month and so on and so forth.
Ranchers proposed to you?
Yeah. So there is some influence, but just know this, that just as there are specialists within the medical profession, there are specialists within the dietetic profession. And what I'm seeing is more and more dietitians or registered dietitians who have tremendous interest in plant-based nutrition. And there is actually a practice group within the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics with probably at least 1,500 members that are vegetarian or vegan dietitians or have great interest in that realm. So when you're seeking out a dietitian or nutritionist, I think it's really important to find out what their area of specialty is and what their sort of bias is. And if you're looking for someone who's more plant-based, to be looking for that and to understand that the average dietitian, like the average physician, is still recommending what we consider a sort of balanced diet that includes foods from all of the food groups and so on and so forth. But you do have options, and there are many more. When I became vegan 30 years ago, I honestly thought I was the only vegetarian dietitian on the planet. I'd never met another one.
You may have been.
I had never, and I was terrified. I thought I was going to be ousted from the profession when they found out I was eliminating 2 of the 4 food groups, So it was scary. But I can still remember thinking to myself, if I don't stay and try to affect change within my profession, who will? I knew I had to have the courage to stay. And so what I did was I made sure all my I's were dotted and my T's were crossed, and that I could back up with, evidence-based research, everything I was saying. I got very familiar with the World Health Organization resources, and I became a strong voice. And so before I knew it, I was being invited to speak at Dietetic Association conferences all over the world. And I was able to teach my fellow dietitians more about plant-based diets. And so it all worked out really well. As a matter of fact, my writing partner, Visanto Molina, just won the highest award offered by Dietitians of Canada. And a vegetarian dietitian that was here earlier today, Rita, is it Bethesda? I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her last name right, but she just won the highest award offered by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics in the United States. And so things are changing. It's quite hopeful. And so just a little bit of positive news there, I think.
Yeah. But I would say generally the education that any of us received, Anna dragged me back, way back when I was 50, to get my doctorate degree in nutrition. And we spent 3.5 years studying day and night and on planes and everything. And frankly, when we took our final exam, I had to lie on half the test to pass it. Because if I didn't lie, I would have failed after 3.5 years of hard work getting this degree, this diploma. So it's what we're learning at school. We have to have imaginations, we have to have interest to move beyond what we were taught. Dr. Fuhrman did. He didn't learn a thing about nutrition at school. From his practice, by the way, he basically started to think wisely, hey, maybe diet and nutrition has something to do with it. He didn't learn a thing. I frankly was told when I was going for that education that you had to take milk. And so can you imagine? This is what they're teaching. It wasn't, 1,000 years ago. We're talking 20 years ago this happened.
And it's also what dietitians and nutritionists are expected to say, because some of them come to our institute and they say, I wish I could give these advices, but I'm not expected to give these advice. So that's too, I think.
Yeah, why are people asking their physicians for nutritional advice anyway?
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you ask your mailman?
Probably knows more.
You know about the same amount, but regardless of that, there's going to be a broad spectrum of opinion among mailmen, either female, and there'll be a broad spectrum of opinion among the legal profession and among doctors who have all different viewpoints. So you just happen to have one doctor, you're asking for his viewpoint. Just go ask anybody else you know. It's the same, it's not anything that you should base your life on it. They're not highly educated in this field. They didn't dedicate their life to reviewing thousands of studies. We've reviewed maybe 50,000 studies on nutrition before we come to our recommendations. They don't give any time. It's not their specialty. Why would you ask them for their opinion?
I can remember the first time I ever spoke to a group of medical doctors. It was probably, 30 years ago. And I was really nervous because doctors know so much. And I thought, it's just going to be challenging to speak in front of them. And at the end of the talk, I was absolutely shocked at the questions they were asking me. They asked me, but don't cashews have cholesterol? And of course, I thought to myself, did you not take grade 11 biology? and then one doctor said, well, that orange juice that you buy and that's frozen in the little can, is that real orange juice? and then I'm not trying to be condescending, but it was just, what I learned there was that the questions they were asking were not any different than the questions I would have received from a general public audience. And it was at that point I realized that they're hungry for nutrition information, exactly. And they haven't received a lot in the past. So.
And of course, we can put in a plug for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine.
Yeah.
When I was a founding member, when there were 40 of us, and now there's 8,000 or more people.
Is it 8,000?
Well, I think it's more than that. They've doubled
Wow.
in their attendance, each
Wow.
year for many, many years now. And so there's a lot of physicians that, just like the general population is expanding, it's so rewarding to see so many physicians that, call me up and thank me and are fans, and they ask me for stuff and they buy my books in bulk and give it to their patients. So on the other hand, there are lots of doctors who are really excited about this, who legitimately want to do what's best for their patients, and they very touching and impressed by so many doctors who are trying their best to incorporate this information in their practice today.